Hey there. So I recently picked up the Haus Labs concealer because I saw a lot of good reviews around it, and I've been really impressed with Haus Labs products in the past. Or I guess just their blush and their highlight. I have a few of those products, and I've just really enjoyed the formulations, and I also really struggle with concealer. So I was hoping, picking it up, I would find a concealer that maybe works for me better than the one that I have now. So let me bring both of those out. Right. So in the middle here, I have Haus Labs, and I forget what color I got it in. I got it in 12 Light Rosy. And it comes in this bottle that it's not glass, so you're not going to break it. But it still feels really nice. This has a very luxe feeling to it, and it looks very luxe. I think mostly just because it has this frosted, heavy plastic, and then the cap has the Haus Labs logo with the notch in the top. It just overall looks nice. It looks nice. One gripe I have with it is the applicator is very large, and it like doesn't really want to fit in or come out. You actually have to put in a good bit of force to do that. But otherwise, I like the packaging. It's pretty nice. The only thing that I found in the past to work for me as concealer is Bobbi Brown's Color Corrector, and I believe both of these are in light bisque. Yes. I definitely like the pot concealer better than the stick concealer, but I need to have a whole other video on comparing these two. But these are the only products where the color works for me. And I want to say these are the only two products where the formula worked for me as well. So my usual issue with concealer is that it runs too warm. It'll be either yellow or orange on my skin. Usually it will be or well, if I find something that has decent undertones, it'll be far, far, far too light on my skin, and it'll look very white underneath my eyes, which is typically the only place I really put concealer, is underneath my eyes. So yeah, that's my usual issue, is it runs too warm. If it has the right undertones, it'll be too light. If it's the right value for my skin tone, it will be way, way, way too warm, and it will appear very dark on my skin. Also, even if I can find something that doesn't have a lot of warmth to it, that doesn't have a lot of orange or yellow in it, it won't be pink enough. These two are really quite pink. Bobbi Brown has a line of peach color correctors, which veer a little bit on the warm side, and then these are the Bisque ones that veer a little bit more on the pink side. And so that's what these are. So yeah, these are the only things that have really worked for me in terms of color. In terms of formulation, most concealers will just do something weird on my skin. Either they'll immediately do this weird pilling thing on my skin and just not even set down properly. Other ones will set down properly, but then they will not just crease, but they'll like flake off, like after a couple of hours. Just in general, I really struggle with the formulation of, I think, complexion products in general, not just concealer, but concealer has been really difficult. I think that these work because they're very, or especially this one is almost oily. I don't know if that's the right word. It's very, very creamy. It's very, very creamy, and I can thin it out a lot, and it doesn't have a lot of dryness to it. And I think that's actually why I like the pot one over the one in the stick. The one in the stick is a little bit drier. They're both a very dense cream formula, and that seems to be the trick for me. And I haven't really found anything else that is like these. There's other things that are color correctors, typically in palettes, that have something that looks like this kind of formulation, but they're too, I want to say dry, but that's not really the right term. They're not as creamy. It's like they look creamy, but they're not oily the way that these are. They lean more almost plasticky feeling. I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing a good job in describing that. But these work really well in terms of color and formulation, so I've stuck with these for a long time. But they're not really concealers. They don't have a lot of coverage to them. They do enough to help my under eyes so that I'm canceling out my under eye purpliness or whatever the darkness is under my eyes. Sometimes I do wish I'd have a little bit more coverage, and I can't really build these up because then they crease really bad, just like everything else underneath my eyes. I wasn't originally going to pick up the Haus Labs one, and then I think Sephora had they had some sort of freebie that I really wanted. So I got this because I wanted the freebie. And I was also curious to try this out. I've gone to Sephora a few times since this has come out, and originally they didn't even have this in the store. And then when they did have this in the store, they didn't have the colors that I wanted to try. And I thought about trying a couple of different colors, but then I just ended up going with the darkest one that seemed to have the rosy undertones, or the darkest one that could conceivably work on my skin tone. And I think that was a good choice because this is actually a bit light on my skin, not by like a lot, but by a little bit. Let me go ahead and swatch these for you so that you can see what we are working with here. Okay, I'm taking those out of the camera so that my camera doesn't constantly refocus on them. So we have the Haus Labs here on top, followed by the stick formula of the Bobbi Brown color corrector in light bisque, and then the pot color corrector in the same color. And this one isn't that great of a swatch. Honestly, on my hands, these two look very similar. So I don't know, I probably didn't need to swatch this. But what was interesting to me is, or I should say, what was underwhelming to me when I first got the Haus concealer was it's not very pink. This is the one that's supposed to really have like the most pink undertone in sort of the light to medium category. And this doesn't look like a good match on my skin. And I swatched this on my hand because my hand is probably the best representation of my skin tone on my face. My arm tends to be a little bit more warm toned or less pink. So it looks a lot more. Originally, I thought it looked more yellow on my skin. I think looking at it now, it's just less pink. But I think it's actually a somewhat desaturated tone. Like, I think it's actually a lot like this tone, but less pink in it. It just has a bit of desaturation in the pink tone going on. But when I first swatched this, I think I was doing a video of me comparing like all of the concealers that I currently have. Some of them are very old and I need to throw them away, but I wanted to compare colors. And I have some e.l.f. ones that the color isn't very good on. It's not a good match for me. And this was even worse. This looked more yellow, less pink than the e.l.f. ones that I knew were a bad match for my skin tone. So I was really sad. I'm not even sure if I really tried this out that day. I think I just assumed, oh, this isn't going to work for me, and there probably isn't another color that's going to work better in this line. So sad. And then I think when I did try this on under my eyes, I can't remember what I did. I can't remember how I applied it. I think I applied it with a brush, and the brush was probably dirty, and it applied in a way that looked pretty bad. It looked like a lot of other concealers where it just looked very creasy. It didn't pill up or anything, but it looked like it was adding more texture to my under eye. And that's a normal thing that happens with me in concealer. So I kind of poo-pooed this, and then I didn't really reach for it. Oh, I think I also tried to layer it on top of the Bobbi Brown color corrector, and that was a mess. That did not work out very well either, which isn't surprising to me. I really dislike makeup adding more texture to my skin, so layering two products underneath my eyes is probably not the way to go for me. But then I finally tried this back out, and I put it on my under eyes, and instead of blending it out with a brush, I blended it out with my finger, the way that I do with the Bobbi Brown pot formula. And that was that changed the formula. That changed how the formula sat on my face. And it looked great. It looked so fantastic underneath my eyes. And it actually looks very similar underneath my eyes to the Bobbi Brown pot formula, the way that it sits underneath my eyes. And more surprisingly, the color looked the same too. And that's what confused me the most, because you can see here, this color does not match either one of these. These are pretty different colors. Even if they somehow do have the same undertones, which I don't know if that's true. But this is a different color. This is, I don't know if it's lighter, but it definitely has less pink in it. But when I blended it out underneath my eyes, it looked like I could not distinguish these two colors underneath my eyes. They looked exactly the same. And this one has more coverage. So the Haus Labs actually covers my under eyes, the darkness under my eyes, a bit better than the Bobbi Brown one does. So that was interesting. After trying this out for a few days, I kept on comparing it against the Bobbi Brown color corrector in the pot, since that's my favorite formula. And I'm a little bit torn. I still really like the Bobbi Brown one. I think that it looks, well, I think both of them look natural underneath my eyes. I think the Bobbi Brown one looks a little bit more dewy underneath my eyes. And the Haus Labs one looks a little bit more dry. Not in that it looks drying, but this one looks pretty emollient underneath my eyes. And both of those look pretty natural on my skin. I would say the Haus Labs really blends into my skin and looks like skin underneath my eyes. And the Bobbi Brown one just has a bit of reflectivity, which I kind of like underneath my eyes too. And mind you, this is after I set them with my Westman Atelier powder. So I really like both of these. And I'm very surprised that I like the Haus Labs one as much as I do, especially with my initial impressions of it and the color just being just so much different than this. But here's the thing. Now, mind you, I like this concealer from Haus Labs more than any other concealer I have ever tried in this kind of an applicator. Anything that has like a doe foot that goes into like a bottle thing and that you swipe it onto your face with. Any other concealer I have tried, or really any concealer I have tried, because these two from Bobbi Brown aren't concealer. These are color correctors. So yeah, any other concealer that I've tried has just been an absolute mess. And this actually works. So I'm very pleased with this. And I think if you were thinking about trying this out, or if you're someone who also really struggles with concealer on your skin type, and even your skin tone, because this does something with the way that it blends into your skin. However, this is not as foolproof as the Bobbi Brown color corrector for me. This, sometimes it works really well. And I think there might just be like a learning curve to it, but sometimes it doesn't look as good, and sometimes it really creases. And I don't think I've had any issues with it flaking off, but it almost looks like it's about to flake off. And mind you, this isn't a knock at the product at all. Like, that's what my skin usually does to concealers. But there is a way to apply this that works really well and gives me more coverage than the Bobbi Brown under eye corrector. I've been debating keeping this, and I keep on going back and forth, and I don't really know at this point what I'm going to do. Because I really like my color corrector from Bobbi Brown, and it's not anywhere near being finished. Like, I haven't even hit pan on it. And I'll be perfectly honest, when I picked this up, I wasn't expecting to like this. I was just very curious. And, you know, every other concealer on the market has failed me. At least everything that I've swatched, which has basically been everything in Sephora. Yeah, I think I still have a picture from that. It's like me with like, I don't even know how many swatches down my arms, but this one worked really well, and I'm really impressed with this. I'm still torn as to whether I'm going to keep this or not, simply because I think I like the emolliency of the Bobbi Brown product a little bit more. But if this was finished, if I didn't have the Bobbi Brown product, I might switch over to Haus Labs. Maybe. I'm not entirely sure. So I still have to figure that out for myself, but overall, I will say I'm very impressed with this formula, and I really would recommend this to anyone who also has issues with concealers. This is a very nice formula, And I mean, her shade range does something to work for me. One thing that I don't like about her shade range is I think I do need something a little bit darker than this. Same undertones. Undertones seem to work really well. But this is a little bit bright. And I mean, so is the Bobbi Brown color corrector. This is a little bit light for me too. That's just my struggle. I need something that's a little bit darker without it being warmer toned. And the jump between this and the next concealer that has rosy undertones is, it's not even the medium. I think it's in like the tan. It's in the tan range, or it's even darker than that. And that's not going to work for my skin tone. That being said, this works really well. I do wish that there was another color that was a little bit darker, maybe a little bit pinker. But that's my usual issue with concealers. So if you were thinking about picking this up, if you can, definitely go and swatch it out and see, you know, if the color line works for you at all. But I will say, I don't think you're going to be able to swatch this in store and see what the formula is like, especially if you're like me and you effectively just use concealer underneath your eyes. If I had just gone and swatched this in store, I would have just thought it was like every other concealer there. And it's not. This blends out really nicely underneath my eyes. And I'm not going to recommend you to go into a store and put the sample concealer there underneath your eyes. I don't know how safe that would be, but I would recommend to try this out. This is pretty nice, and I'm really impressed with this.
So I did make an update video after this, about a few weeks after this. Unfortunately, my computer ate that footage. So I'm just going to give a quick update here on the Haus Labs concealer. And unfortunately, I did not end up keeping this. I did test this out for 3 or 4 weeks. I can't remember exactly how long I kept it. Even though I liked the formula, even though I thought the formula was way better than any actual concealer that I had used before, I couldn't get it to work consistently for me. Unfortunately, it would sometimes just crease so terribly, even after I set it down. Sometimes it would look really cakey no matter what I did, and I couldn't really figure out if there was something I was doing wrong or if there was just something different happening when those issues would come up. And I couldn't ever tell when it was going to set down really nicely or when it was going to look bad enough that I'd have to take it back off and put something else on. So unfortunately, I did declutter this. It just, even though the formula is nice and it can look nice on me, which is novel for a concealer formula, as this is the first concealer I've ever put on that it actually can look nice and it can actually wear nice. It just wasn't consistent. And I don't want to have to play with a finicky product. So I'm sticking with the Bobbi Brown under eye corrector for now. But I do hope that I will be able to find something else in the future, because I did notice in testing the Haus Labs formula, I think the color was actually better. And I'm kind of realizing now that the Bobbi Brown correctors that I use actually pull a little bit orange on me. That is my usual issue, is that most concealers or concealer type things will pull quite orange on me, but I hadn't really noticed that in the Bobbi Brown corrector before, but now I have, and now I can't unsee it. But unfortunately, the Haus Labs concealer did not work for me. But that doesn't mean that it won't work for someone else. I have a feeling it has something to do with my skill level, but I'm just not going to be playing around with a finicky formula.
Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. If there's anything that you feel I left out, let me know. And if you've tried this out, let me know what you think of the Haus Labs concealer. Did it work for you? Did it not? Is there something else that works better? And thank you so much for spending your precious time with me. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was entertaining. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.